people think of DC exactly how you said. Like they think like, oh, well, that's bigger issues and this, that, and the third. And it's like, no, this is our tribe. Like we need to take care of our own. It doesn't matter if you're left of the left, right of the right. Like personal politics, gone. This trip is not about personal politics. It's about this industry.
Something that I picked up when we were at Trenton with Kyle was we were sitting in this room talking about like our passions, and everyone else that was there was talking about their passion.
Right.
And you can start to see how your passion, like, I obviously think that nutrition is the root of all of society. We're not fed well, we're all going to fall apart. That's pretty well proven. And I think a lot of people picked up on that. I said this a lot really often, like there's really, really big influencers like Huberman that are talking about nutrition. Rogan talks about nutrition. We all know it's important, but everyone else that's in town right now also thinks that, transportation, that feeds our entire world. Like that's how we get places, how we travel, how we move goods, right? So everyone has to talk about their own tribe and their own passion because it does there. But I felt the same way. I got kind of just frustrated with all things. I don't even really want to talk about it. I want to talk about things that are important to me.
Right.
And nutrition to me, like, is that core of everything. Like we can solve so much. It's health month. It's mental health. It's so many different things. And nutrition, we've all seen from cleaning up our nutrition, and eating well, and giving ourselves the right supplements. It's changed the way that we live. So to me, like, I think we could change a lot just focusing on what we're good at.
Right. And so the reason we're here in Washington, D.C. This is episode 100 of Dan Fabricant, Natural Products Association, NPA. And it's about June 6th, 2023. We've never done this, but we're here for Fly-In Day. And Dan was joking earlier that I am not into politics. And I said, that's not exactly true. I just kind of became black-pilled over the last X many years because I lost a lot of friends in 2016. People can imagine what I was supporting. And so I was supporting Trump, the platform that he had, lost a lot of the friends that I had, like played volleyball with and surfed with in Southern California. You can imagine why and everything. Trump ended up not doing the things I wanted, and I wasn't invited to birthday parties and stuff like that. I've gotten over it and everything, but it's like, and so you met me at a time when I was done with national party politics, and I still am. I don't think it matters. Trump, DeSantis, you're not gonna see me arguing about these guys, or Biden, Gavin Newsom, any of that stuff. You're not gonna see me arguing about any of that stuff. And so I went away and got kind of black-pilled over a lot of things, like the response in 2020 and 2021 and everything. But then I got pulled back into politics, and in a way that's more healthy, because it's what matters to us, our passions, our businesses, our industry, our tribes, like you said.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's important, like in general, I think that there's kind of like a one direction trend of where like the national apparatus is heading.
Sure.
But at the same time, we should fight for the things that are very important to us. Yeah, energy, transportation, all these things are very important. But for us, nutrition is the foundation. And if we can do whatever it takes to at least slow down a downhill rolling rock, or at least like move things back into the direction that we believe is right, I think it is worth getting involved. So here we are, Fly-In Day.
No, and thank you guys for being here, and it's a real honor to be episode 100. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think to your point, both of your points, it is really, folks always drive the conversation with passion, and they are passionate about it, but passion's not enough. Like, we have to show up, right? And that's really what this is about. That's what tomorrow is about, is really showing up. Because as you guys both pointed out, everybody's focused on their issues, and their issues to them are as important as what we do is to us. And unfortunately, the industry, because it is doing so well, I mean, you think of an industry that 80% of the country uses every day, dietary supplements in general, not really focusing on sports or performance, which is still a big part of the population, but 80% of the country uses a supplement a day. That's a pretty good place to start from. But it's not like, I think a lot of folks think that and go, well, 80% of people use it today. Why do we need to speak up for ourselves? They already know how good we are. It's like, not so fast. I think what we're seeing, especially in the States, and what we saw last year with NPL, is there's still that narrative out there that we're not regulated, and somehow that leads to harm, right? And that's when they start trying to make the industry smaller, restrict the industry, which I think isn't to anyone's advantage.
Awesome. So for this episode, I want to kind of get you to formally define NPA, what you're doing here, what your goals are. You run a pretty lean team here, so want to hear a bit about that, but then also get into like, what are we doing this weekend specifically in 2023, but like have a broader look after that as well, and like talk about longer term goals and everything. But I also want to talk about like the nitty gritty. Obviously, I'm into NMNs, so I want to we'll get into that.
But before we start that, I think it's worth noting we podcasted once before about MPL, so if people want to check up on that, that was a really great episode. I kind of to your points. I really say want to talk about broad NPA as well as just to the specific topics. I think a lot of people are going to be coming back to watch this video later on. So whatever happens this week, whatever happens this quarter with Dead Men, I still want to talk a lot about what you guys do, where you come from, because I think that's very valuable information. I don't think a lot of people know about the NPA.
No, and that's fair. We're almost 90 years old, the organization. It's the supplements, right? But started in 1936 and really came out of the health food retailers, the mom and pop health food retailers. When at the time, I mean, think about 1936. People were selling, bread with extra grain in it. And it was like, oh my God, why would you do that, right? So but it's still that spirit, right? It's that innovative spirit. It's that growth. We've grown a lot. We've grown, shrunk, grown again. We're about 700 members right now, so it's the largest trade association in the industry. We also have retail members like GNC, Vitamin Shop, great folks, great touchstone to the consumer. And the consumer is really such a key part of all this, right? Like it doesn't move without their input, their buy-in, their support. And we're not a consumer group, we're an industry group, but we really pride ourselves on our grassroots and being able to touch the consumer, and that happens through, and you bring up what you guys did on NPL, that was huge. I mean, we saw spikes in the grassroots the day of the podcast and things like that. So it made a huge difference, right? And that was a proposal that potentially could have made, think about a mess that would have been made with NPL coming into place, where FDA just goes, hey, we don't like something, you're off the list, and that supplement's gone. And then, like we talked about, if you change the flavor and, oh, hey, someone at FDA is going on vacation for 6 weeks, and now, you can't get your product stocked because, hey, they lost it. Or as we saw, Commissioner Califf said on the infant formula scare, there were documents that were lost in the mail. Yeah, kind of a problem when you've got 6 infants that the commissioner, that's all he has to offer. So this organization has always liked to fight. I'll be frank, and you guys know me. I don't believe we've ever lost a case to the FDA when suing them in federal court. This organization has a long history of suing them. That's why the NAC thing last year kind of came full circle, because it's been a while. The industry used to do that a lot more frequently. I think given the state of government, like you brought up, Mike, that's going to have to become more and more commonplace.
Sadly, but someone's got to fight. So backing it up even more, nonprofit organization.
Yes.
So does anyone own it or anything? You're the CEO.
Yeah.
How does it work? I guess I need really quickly nonprofit 101, because we're so into our private businesses in this industry.
We have members and we have a board. The board drives the policy, and the board, I'm on the board, but I'm ex officio, so I serve at the pleasure of the board, and they really set the direction. So it's really the board that was like, hey, you know what? Let's go after FDA on NAC. Let's pursue what we're pursuing on NMN. Let's fight back on NPL. And our board's all on our website, so you can see who those folks are. And they really are the stewards of the industry. They're the folks like Jim Emmy's a great example from Now Foods. I mean, Jim takes on Amazon routinely, right, and pulls products in this day and age. And it's funny because I think Now is one of the better sellers on Amazon too. So it's but these are guys that, and Jim was also a recon Marine, so appropriate that it's D-Day, I guess, bringing him up. They're folks who really, I think they've seen, and they come from different walks of life, some very corporate, some completely from this industry, but I think they've seen that the government flares up, both state and local and federal, from time to time, with that rhetoric on our industry that we're not regulated, we're somehow out to harm consumers. And I think that really inspires them to move.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be a big challenge for anyone to see a Now Foods bottle and think that there's any intended harm there.
Right.
And so that's the level that we're dealing with here. And these supplements are basically everywhere, like you said, 80% of users. And you also mentioned states. This isn't just we got to keep the FDA in check. This is 50 different states that could potentially close down a Vitamin Shop or make them put a certain bottle behind glass shelves, and which will dramatically lower sales and everything. So everyone,
category killer, right? If you're, okay, so it's supposed to restrict for people 18 and 18 and older. But if you're a college kid and you want to buy whey protein and you walk into a Vitamin Shop and they're like, check your ID. They're like, I'm not doing that. And it only punishes brick and mortar, and it's which is even worse. So yeah, these are all misguided. They're not based on any science. The bill that just passed the Senate in New York, it talks about creatine being, some sort of a hazard. I mean, creatine, it has to be outside of probably salt and caffeine. I can't think of a food ingredient that there's more safety studies on, literally. And yet it's like, oh, hey, no, you got to put that behind the counter. And you go, what is that?
When are they going to get over this fucking creatine thing?
I know, right? I mean, but it's crazy, Mike, right? It's like you go, I mean, and here's the fucked up thing is you look throughout NIH, they're using it for all these neurological disorders, right? They're even looking at it for Alzheimer's. And you go, okay, like, what the fuck, right? And it's always, well, kids, these athletes take it. I don't understand the whole body dysmorphia argument. Like, to me, that's so supplements are giving you an eating disorder, but we can't say that fucking Oreos and McDonald's are giving you obesity. Right? Like, where does that, how does that work? Right?
Yeah. It just seems like no matter how many research studies, there's literally, I saw one study that had 300 citations inside of it.
For creatine, right?
Yeah. And no matter what, it just seems like 30 years, it still is going to be called a steroid or something. Yeah. And it's just literally this molecule that's in meat that's helps your body produce it.
It's right. And that's the thing is you just go, it's bananas. It's absolutely, when you hear anybody in performance, I remember when I was at UNC, one of my buddies was at LSU, and Tommy Moffitt was an early creatine adopter. He was a strength coach there, and he was basically like, there's like, how are you guys able to work out 4 times a week? And he was just like, creatine. And it's like, that's his job. Like, these kids were better athletes because of it, changed their life because of it. And I don't recall seeing any dead bodies coming in the office today for creatine. But you're right. I mean, this 30-year creatine is it's like Bobby Boucher's mom. Creatine is the devil,
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I didn't want to turn this into Mike's conspiracy podcast, but Ben's like, oh boy. But no, okay, there's a kind of a clear anti-meat, anti-beef agenda, anti-cow agenda.
Right.
And I've ranted about that in the past. Creatine is a great way of, if you were vegan, cool. But I would highly suggest you get a vegan creatine and everything. And it seems like it kind of just dovetails
Yeah, you can't eat enough cranberries. It's in cranberries. You'd have to eat a ton of cranberries. Yeah, you'd have to eat literally a bog of cranberries.
Hey, you never get a UTI or whatever. So I was just wondering, is this somehow connected or anything? Man, they really just don't want us getting our creatine in.
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I think there's always it's funny with performance. There's always this anti-performance backlash too, right? I mean, that's the one thing about this industry, and it's so interesting what you guys do is. Performance leads the way for this industry, right? It may not necessarily be in the gym. It may be, your ginkgo biloba for your memory. It may be, but it's like you take supplements because you go, I would like to be a better version of me, right?
I think of supplements a lot like car technology. F1 racing is where a lot of the pinnacle of technology is developed, and those things are somehow watered down and made their way into the Toyota Prius.
Right.
That efficiency is still you may not be a fan of F1 racing, but if you drive a Prius, you may have gotten something from that, right? And that in sports nutrition, especially the performance as a whole, there's always people on the forefront of that looking for that. Maybe a holistic person who that's the product you want, but the people in the front of that research, that's how it disseminates its way to you, right? But that's how I always look at it.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's right. But it's interesting. There's always this anti-performance kind of backlash, and creatine suffers it more than anything because it's to your point, it's studied for everything now, everything, and the safety studies. It's I don't know if you tried, you could get to a level of creatine where it wouldn't self-regulate. So
So here's a question. There are some studies on, I don't know if children, but 13-year-old girls or so for adolescents, cognitive benefits or whatever. Do we ever touch any of that at all as a dietary supplement community? Because I'm okay to personally blog about it because I believe in blogging the truth. But obviously, dietary supplements are for 18 and older. But a lot of kids are getting handed whey protein shakes from their parents and stuff now too. So where do you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think at the end of the day, it's about self-care, right? And what form does that take? I think overall we've been kind of in that performance vein of self-care. But I mean, you look at the UK during COVID where the government sent people, I think, 2,000 IUs a day of vitamin D, right? And why? Because COVID status was the number 2 comorbidity, vitamin D status was number 2 comorbidity with COVID. So, but we did the complete opposite here. And you go, at what point So wait a second. We can do all this research. I saw a stat that since 2021, there were something over 900 different research studies on vitamin D and COVID, and we can't talk about it. And it's like, aren't we the country with the First Amendment? Like, it makes no sense. Like, there should be a vein. When you look at health claims, right? Structure function claims being one thing, but health claims. We only have 22 or 23 full health claims from FDA. You look at folic acid as the example. To get that neural tube defect claim took 18 years. People have known since the early 1900s that you needed folate to get rid of neural tube defects. We've seen a rise in neural tube defects in like the Hispanic community because they don't fortify masa flour. And it's like, but that information still gets treated like, we got to be careful what we say. And it's like, the research is there. Like, we should be able to talk about it. We really should. I'm not talking about like one in vitro study saying something cures cancer, but
right.
I mean, but like you said, with creatine, it's like, on people with some serious cognitive diseases, it seems to do quite a bit for them.
Right, or at least can't hurt.
Yeah.
So over the last year, you especially have learned a lot about how dietary supplements work, specifically coming to market and the regulatory around them. But I actually think that even the people who watch our podcast, and plus especially people that are going to be new to this podcast, don't have a super granular understanding of what makes a dietary supplement, what makes a dietary ingredient, how that comes to market, how they're regulated. Could we do a super top level understanding for people who are watching the show for the first time? Just I know we probably go super granular and NPAs, but just to give base as we're getting into this, can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we kind of look at it as 4 pillars here, right? Like the regulatory, what's the regulatory framework? You have your labeling issues, so you've got to disclose, you have to have your supplement facts panel, statement of identity, list out your ingredients, if it's a botanical, Latin binomial, how you identify the product and what you can say about it. If you make a structure function claim, which is a general, more or less a general health and wellness claim, calcium builds strong bones, you have to have the disclaimer, this product hasn't been, evaluated to cure, treat, mitigate. So that's kind of one pillar. Then we have the quality pillar, if you will, which are the GMPs, 21 CFR Part 111. Now, they were supposed to be designed after food GMPs. Having been at the agency a little after they were promulgated, they are largely designed after 210 and 211, which are the drug GMPs, but they're not. There are some ways they're different, but largely the same. You have to set specifications. You have to ensure specifications are met. You can't have anything that would contaminate the product. You have to have process controls to ensure that. And GMP, for any regulatory nerds, is great mounds of paper, right? If you don't write it down, it didn't happen. So then you get to your pre-market safety pillar, if you will, which we'll say is the NDI process. Now you also have your grandfathered or old dietary ingredient list or pre-déchet list, which are things that we knew were on the market, like from those health retailing catalogs. Those things are grandfathered. Most of those are vitamins, minerals, things that have been around for a long time.
We'll talk about grandfather, in 1994, all that.
But if it's new to the diet, you have to do food toxicology, usually 90-day acute, subacute studies to ensure that it's not going to lead to any organ system failures, no sort of genotoxicity, and establish a safe dose or a no-AL, people throw that term around, but no adverse effect level, and set a safety threshold from there. While there are firewalls in the law between food additive petition, which used to be all pre-market, and the NDI, the toxicology is very similar that you're going to do for, a new food ingredient like they did for NutraSweet that you're going to do for, a new NDI like NMN.
A new NDI means new dietary ingredient.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay, and these pre-market approvals are also kind of governed by DSHEA as
Yes,
well, which is a really big topic, which defines dietary supplements, like what they are, right?
Yep, and it's a notification process, right? Like you notify the agency. Now, the agency will send you one of 4 letters in response. They will send you an AKL or a good day letter saying, we agree with your safety, go to market, no problem. They'll send you what's called it's weird. It's called an IAL, an inadequate letter. And you go, inadequate, so I guess I didn't meet the criteria. Actually, you met the statutory criteria. FDA just says they don't necessarily agree with your safety or sometimes your identity, but mostly safety. You can still go to market. At that point, it's up to FDA to demonstrate that the product presents an unreasonable risk of illness or injury if they wanted to pull it off the market. Then the other 2 letters you really don't want. One is an NDL, which is a not a dietary ingredient letter, or you get what's called an ICL, which is an incomplete, which means you didn't file appropriately. So those you'd still be adulterated and they could take action. And then lastly is the adverse event reporting system, which is huge. Exactly the same. Worked on that my first trip at NPA in 2006. It's identical to what's out there. People always go, well, you guys aren't regulated like pharmaceuticals. Actually, that part is identical to over-the-counter and prescription. Same MedWatch system. Best system in the world. You'll hear people make critiques about it, but MedWatch really is probably one of the better, I think, detection systems for post-market. It's kind of how the agency was able to eventually get around, and they had a lot against them on things like Purdue Pharma and Vioxx and so on. Yeah, so I mean, it packs a punch. It takes a while. Now, for our industry, the metrics are different. For our industry, the AERs, for Vioxx, I think it took like 60,000 AEs before FDA could take action. Yeah. And so with our industry, it can be a much lower threshold because, really it's the risk-benefit calculation is slightly different.
So when people say that dietary supplements aren't regulated, it's actually, they're regulated pre-market.
Mm-hmm.
They're regulated in how you can market them.
Mm-hmm.
They're regulated how you quality control for them. Mm-hmm. And they're also regulated for, what was the fourth one?
Well, you can say labeling. Yeah. Well, and it's not just FDA. We have FTC. You guys saw FTC just sent love letters to 700 companies that weren't really love letters. They sent it specifically to companies, but said there was no active investigation. So it didn't make a whole lot of sense. We had members call us and say, "Hey, why am I on the list?" We also had members call and say, "Hey, why am I not? Why didn't I make the list?" Right? It's like, as if that implied there was something on them, or in FTC, we called them the day after. Actually, I wish Kevin could be here, our attorney. Kevin and I, he recently had a loss in the family, so we miss Kevin. But we called FTC 2 days after, and we're like, "What gives?" And they go, "Well, what's the problem?" And it's like, this is a guidance. And they're like, yeah, kind of. It's like, well, why did you send it to specific companies? It's just like, it's just interfering with your business, right? Let's say you were trying to raise money and now all of a sudden you're mentioned on some list of FTC, even though within the letter it says this doesn't mean you have a case or anything else. You're pretty sure you're going to get a call from those investors going, what the heck is going on, right?
Right. Okay. So one thing we haven't said yet is that we did have a podcast that's not yet up on the feed, and it's probably going to be episode 102 with Michael Goodman of Hudson Cook, and he's an FTC lawyer. He's not a specific expert in the dietary supplement industry, but he gave some comments regarding what he thinks the FTC is doing, and kind of like the clock is starting in terms of for a lot of the companies on that list, they may be able to go after them afterwards.
I think it's well said. And I also think FTC was saber rattling because they just lost an important court decision. Mm-hmm. And so that was part of it too, is now they have to demonstrate intent to defraud.
That's what they're doing. Yeah.
And so this was like them going, well, no, we don't. And it's like, yeah, you kind of do, but we'll see what happened. They've had some staff changes, important staff changes. There was a guy there who used to be my counterpart and I worked with a lot when I was at FDA. A guy named Rich Cleland. He recently retired, and he was like the guy was at FTC for almost 25 years. I mean, he led the way on so many precedent cases. So it'll be curious to see how they pick up the pieces there,
Okay. So what did you want to say? Because
curious what you want to move into, but he mentioned that he worked at the FDA, and I think before we get to the bulk, I'd like to maybe just talk about your time at the FDA.
Yeah, right. I don't think anyone realizes you're a biochemist, and right, you have a lot of things. So let's get into your background, I guess.
Yeah. So the really interesting thing is you call yourself the FDA director with the most enforcement in dietary supplement history. So
yeah.
What kind of things did you enforce on? And also, you're a biochemist. I'll get into like your actual scientific knowledge of this as well.
Well, I can show you the plaques in the office from FDA. We had the first injunction for GMPs. So we shut down the first company for GMPs when I was there, which was big. Never happened before. They had some challenges, let's just say, in their manufacturing.
You shut down a brand or a manufacturing facility?
Manufacturing facility, yeah. The doors were barred until they could improve and show they could actually demonstrate a product had the innate quality it should have. So that was a big thing. We had I think for 2 years, we led the entire agency, and I only 26 people in legal actions, so seizures and injunctions. I think we had 6 and 6 for 2012 and 2013, which, like I said, we only had 26 people. Other parts of the agency, let's just say they had a whole lot more. Right. So it was proud of that. Sent a lot of warning letters. I think people remember a lot, the DMA thing and then the Agilene thing, the USP Labs, which was big.
I really want to specifically, Jared, comfortable talking about like, you were the guy that banned DMA.
I didn't ban it. I enforced on it. Yeah, I didn't ban it. And it was an interesting thing because as soon as I walk in the agency in 2011, people were like, DMA hadn't hit kind of peak. I think it was just towards the end of 2011 going into 2012. And it was like DMA was everywhere and doing quite well. And at that point, it was like, we really had to do something. And it was interesting because it really was that NDI provision. There wasn't an NDI file that enabled us to kind of move ahead. So we sent out a rash of NDI letters. Most of the companies said, we're going to get out of this business. A few fought us, USP Labs and a few others. And that kind of drug on. There were some seizures then after that to move it ahead. And that kind of really got the product out of commerce. And then literally right on the heels of that, I remember my daughter was born in 2012, and she was little. It was the summer of 2013, and the government was shutting down. And we were just, and we were just, it was August, and we had a few cases in Hawaii of liver failure on a weight loss product, which was, USP Labs products containing Agiline. And but I got told on the 30th that I was non-essential. So I was like, great, I'm going home. I get to spend some time with my daughter. She's young. So I literally lay down with my daughter on the 1st and get a call from my boss at the time saying I got to come in because there were 3 more adverse events in Hawaii.
That was bad.
On the liver failure. So
we were on different sides of the DMA thing.
Yeah.
I want to get into that
Yeah.
and talk about like what defines a dietary ingredient. And we'll use geranium/DMAA as an example.
Yeah.
The Agiline thing, that was horrific. And I didn't realize how bad it was until we got to see some of the internal emails. Like that was, dude, yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah, it
The
was.
comparison between DMA and NMN, I think, is a really important one. That it could be a really cool discussion.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about NDIs here. We're talking about one where I'm expecting some negative comments when we talk about DMA because there's a lot of people who really like it, right?
There are a lot of people upset with me. I mean,
At the same time, USP Labs never filed a new dietary ingredient notification.
Right.
And, like that's where
No, and they
that's where
fought
we
that,
come back together.
Right. They fought like, hey, we don't have to file. And it's like, if you file, like you're almost like, look, if they would have filed, I'm not going to sit here because I'm not a judge. I'm not going to sit here and say the consequences might have been different. But what would be the government's argument? It's like, well, they were out of compliance. They came into compliance. What would be the argument?
I guess
there's so much to talk about here.
There is. We're talking about like whether or not there's an NDI for it, but there was also a core conversation surrounding the presence of it in geranium.
Yeah.
Right. And so, are you telling me that like even though it was you need an entire field of geranium, it would have been okay, or hypothetically speaking, like you're not a judge, we all understand.
Yeah.
Even though that's it, DMA could have been legal if there wasn't an NDI.
Possibly, or somebody could have done a real grass panel and put it into DMA water for 6 months and then sold it. I mean, that could have been another option, right?
Right.
Yeah, but nobody.
Okay, so I guess what we should do at this point, and I'm not sure of our whole agenda here, but we should just define what is a dietary supplement. We talked about DSHEA in 1994 and everything. We got some bullet point lists, and then constituent, botanical, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I guess could be
where would DMA fit? I think is the question that we always get, right?
And then we could use that as an example, but it could also dovetail into NMN and how things are different in that case and everything. Or we can make up a rhodiola Roberto or something like that. Like it doesn't matter.
It's just the most prolific. Like 18-year-old kids in the gym know about DMA. If we talk about NMN, it's a great discussion. I'm very, very passionate about it, but it seems like DMA, like that's a great example to use for this discussion because people remember it being banned.
Right.
18-year-olds don't.
Well, and technically it wasn't banned. Technically, the only ingredient they've ever banned outright by regulation is ephedra. Yeah, it's ephedra.
You can still get that. Just go to CVS and.
Yeah, but just HCL. It is a drug, right?
Wait, what's so funny? What, did I walk into something?
I would buy a pharmaceutical drug.
No, I said you can still get it.
Well, sure.
But yeah, it's not a dietary.
I'm disagreeing with
not
that.
a dietary supplement. Though. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a cold. I'm always in the summer for some reason, right?
Yeah, and then we walk through. It's funny though if we walk through kind of the categories of what is a definite, it's definitional. That's what DSHEA did, is give you a definition of dietary supplements. So vitamin, mineral, we know what those are. So those we can take off the table. Though vitamin we'll go back to because on NMN that could play a role, right? Is niacin equivalent. Right. And you put it together a really nice piece on that. And I think it kind of lays it bare that, and there's a lot of biochemists who are like, it's a better form of niacin. And this is what niacin is supposed to do is go into the NAD cycle, and that's what it does. But we'll park that for a second. So then you get into botanical, right? Which is that was the initial thing on DMA. And I think where the challenge was sorry for doubling up there. They were like, no, it's in there. It was in rose geranium oil. It wasn't in rose geranium oil. If you go back to the old GRAS notices, they did a good really gas chromatography and kind of quantified what was there. It was never seen there. So that was kind of strike one. And then if it was in the plant, I think some of the some of the science that was used was a little, some people say they found it, some people say they didn't. There were some questions. But then you go, okay, that may not be the only path forward as a botanical or constituent of. You have FF1E, which is a constituent of the diet. People are very confused on that part of you've got the 6 categories.
Right,
Yeah.
a substance used to like supplement the diet.
Right. People are very confused. Now, the FDA's interpretation, I can tell you, and if you go to the NDI guidance, it's basically they think those are food additive petition substances and GRAS substances, right? So you go, okay, if somebody actually submits a GRAS for that, puts it in the diet, the FDA says for 6 months. I don't know where they get that from. It's not in the statute, but puts it in. It's not. But that's always been their stance. You could then put something like that on the market.
This GRAS you talking about, by the way, just
Generally recognized safe. Sorry. Yeah.
we talked about geranium. So GRAS, I forget.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the
Right,
one.
yeah.
So we want to hear
Yeah.
GRAS.
So yeah, now that's the agency will always think that FF1E is a limited universe. I guess when I was at the agency, I didn't see it that way. I don't think it's like I don't think it necessarily expands exponentially, but I do think it's expansive. It's got to be. I mean, there's really our diet's going to grow over time, right? It's not going to shrink. Hopefully, we get to know more about, and it's kind of a ridiculous concept when you think about it. It's like, okay, in 58, when you got the first GRAS and food additive petition, laws in place, the notion that something you ate it, you ingested it, you were exposed to it, but it wasn't the article of the diet is a little silly. People ate, for example, hemp back in 1958, ingested CBD, but now CBD is precluded. You kind of go, well, wait a second, how did they were exposed to it? There wasn't per se a public health concern and safety. So what is the real concern there? Like, what are we actually using the law for? Are we using it just to protect pharma IP? Or are we actually concerned of chemicals that people are exposed to in food and keeping them safe? I would like to think it's the second.
People ever explored, growing up in science, they always told us, the Eaton Kurtz of the rainforest, you don't even know all the stems there. We know more about space than we do in the sea. There's obviously things that we don't know that exist out there. People kind of ever talked about the possibility of what if an asteroid hits and there's something
Right.
maybe from that, right?
Right.
Where are the limitations of this?
Well, my background is actually plant drug discovery from plants, pharmacognosy, and there are, I believe, 300,000 flowering plants, higher plants on the planet, and the notion that we've broken them all apart and discovered every constituent there, and also now with AI engines and with nanoscale biology, I'm pretty sure you can probably go back in and look at some of those discoveries and find a whole new biological function too.
Yeah. So let's use that as an example. Let's say I find a new type of geranium that has this DMAA molecule in it. Can I all of a sudden, just immediately, and maybe people were, or maybe they weren't eating this geranium plant long ago. Can you just start putting that into a capsule and selling it? Question A. Question B is, can I start extracting stuff and just put it into a capsule? Are there different things that happening, or can I then just synthetically make this DMAA ingredient?
Where's the lines?
Where
right?
are these lines at? Yeah.
I think the first line is it the article of diet, right? That's the agency's fallback, and there's a lot of good case law on that. Hey, is it the article? Did you eat that botanical for the DMAA? If the answer is no, then it probably needs an NDI.
Okay.
Or a GRAS, because then that's the article. You're taking something that might have been there in minuscule quantities. Now you're having a greater exposure level. Just scientific argument. It's like, okay, if I expose someone to something that was in nanogram, picogram quantities, and now I'm giving him milligram, gram quantities, I need to have some sort of rendering on the safety there. I mean, I think that's just, people may disagree, but I think that,
Understood.
chemistry is chemistry, biology is biology. So that's kind of trigger one. The synthetic piece is an argument that, and I guess I'm somewhat, I don't want to say guilty on that, but, I used to joke, people, well, what about synthetic botanicals? And I said, well, have you been to the synthetic botanical arboretum, right? And I think the point being is that nature makes things, amino acids. We have L and D, amino acids. And so if the chirality is the same, if its orientation in space is the same, handedness, as people say, right? Your left and your right hand aren't, they're not the same, right? So as long as that is identical, what would be the agency's public health stance, right? Like if a molecule is, because we have synthetic vitamins,
Right.
we have synthetic amino acids. I mean, pretty much all our amino acids are synthetic. It's not like people are extracting them from plants or meat. That would be a hell of an expensive process. We also use synthetic biology now to make those, right? We transfect aspergillus and, do all sorts of things, get all sorts of food ingredients. So, yeah, there's some good arguments to be made on both sides of that. I think the whole thing, public health wise, is what's the argument? Where's the potential for risk? And as long as you can satisfy those, I think you have a good case to make.
Okay, so I want to back it up just a second. So I have this new, we've discovered a flower that they've been eating in South America or something.
Right.
Can we just package that and put it in a supplement and sell it legally right now?
What does it do in the body? No, I mean, I think those are the questions the agency would ask is
Okay.
what does it do? Like, is it a intoxicating plant, right? We don't intoxicate, foods don't intoxicate us,
Okay.
By FDA law. So that would be question kind of one is what's the function, right?
How do you define toxic?
Impairment. It's actually defined in, so 101.93, which is the disease claim reg. So I know we're going deep on the nerd stuff here.
No, but there's a lot of dietary supplements that we take that we really enjoy.
Right,
And I'm like, where's the line between euphoria and intoxication?
Yeah, I'm thinking nootropic effects, and that's not.
Nootropic that would be more performance enhancing,
Right,
right?
yeah.
That would be a different effect, right? I mean, you can feel, I think, euphoric if it makes you perform better, right? But it's a different, I'd say that's more a psychological euphoria than a pharmacological euphoria, right? It's not like you're depressing a system or elevating, a system. But
Because you brought up hemp.
Sure.
It was consumed. And, and believe me, I am very well documented in that. Like, when it comes to fungus and cannabis, and they've been around longer than we have.
Yeah.
And that's my philosophy on it. But those are incredibly beneficial plants in certain for certain reasons, but definitely intoxicating.
yeah, and I think this is where, it's so interesting because the one thing I get to hear all the time, and it ties into the unregulated argument, is these laws don't work. When you think about the way DSHEA was written in 94 and the 6 categories and how it really defined our diet across 6 categories, it's pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
Right, I agree. Because looking back at it, it covers a lot of stuff, and it doesn't seem to miss too much.
No.
I myself wouldn't have been able to do better.
Yeah, right.
We as an industry supported that.
Yeah,
right. Like, like GNC supported.
Oh yeah.
We when people complain on, at least to me, about this, we pretty much voted for this. Like, we worked on this as an industry.
Passed Congress unanimously.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you wouldn't get that now, unanimously.
Yeah. A big understanding, learning from Mike on this was the difference between the FDA writing a rule and DSHEA. I actually think DSHEA is written ironically well for a law.
Yeah.
I don't like regulations in general. I think everyone probably knows that. But it came out in a way that I think is fair.
Yeah.
I think we can all adhere to it.
And I agree. If our elected congressmen and women wrote and passed this law, the president signed it. To me, that is as ironclad as we get. That's this nation. If you don't like it, you gotta move.
Right.
It gives us a safety net. It's not anything for me.
And so getting back to my plant, so once we start extracting constituents out of these botanicals, the FDA, or not the FDA, Congress did write in this whole area called New Dietary Ingredient, NDI. And that's where DMAA there was no NDI on it. And that's kind of where I didn't fully understand it when I was writing these pieces back in 2017 or so, going through NMN this time around. Now I'm like, okay, now I understand this more. And yeah, if we were just eating raw geranium flowers or whatever, maybe that's cool, but that's not exactly what was happening. This was a new dietary ingredient that didn't have, no one filed a new dietary ingredient notification on. So
I think the flip side of it, though, the problem is right now, I could walk you into any brick and mortar store right now and show you a couple dozen products that have ingredients that have never had NDI.
Right.
I'm not going to call out anyone because I probably so there are ingredients that are popular that we talk about that there was never an NDI sign for, but exist.
Yeah.
There are safe ones and unsafe ones. Ones that are very well cemented in the industry, never had an NDI, but we all we know it's tested by the manufacturers. We know that it's quality. And there's the other side of it that I talk to you constantly about. It's there's unsafe stimulants that again there was never an NDI for, and everyone kind of looks the other way for it. So it's kind of it's disheartening when NMN gets the bullshit for this because there are people having heart failure over stimulants that never had an NDI.
Yeah.
And yet we're just trying to make ourselves healthy.
Yeah, NMN did have an NDI that was acknowledged. So that's kind of where where we'll go. And so, yeah, for me, if I were to talk to a congressman this weekend, I would be like, here's why you should be mad. You should be mad because you have this authority, and FDA is trying to take away your authority. And I don't know if I want to say this to someone in person, but like a lot of this is a power game out here. Is it not?
Sure. 100%. Well, and it's also, I mean, the agency you've seen, and kind of taking a step back, they recently had a Reagan-Udall review, which is a third party foundation that looks at all things FDA. And they reviewed the foods program, which dietary supplements were in. Ironically, they chose to leave dietary supplements out of the review because I think they wouldn't have liked what they found. But the message was the same, that FDA is just defiant towards Congress sometimes. Like, and if you follow the infant formula issue, it was literally like, yeah, we'll get back to you. It's, for the people who got elected by saying we're protecting the children, not really an acceptable answer to say we'll get back to you, right? Like, there's it's definitely power game, but it's clear that FDA doesn't like the industry on some level. I certainly saw some of that when I was at the agency, and I'm not necessarily saying the people in the division. Certainly, a lot of the attorneys didn't like it because they they think that the drug laws, the drug approval process is clean, and everything should have to go through that level of scrutiny because it's a lot more power for them, right? And they get user fees and so on and so forth. So it's like it's an additive effect. Whereas here we are as self-care, where we're going to, go, hey, I can read on the web that I may need more zinc. And I'm going to just go do it versus go, I'm dependent on the agency. The agency really liked COVID because they like to hear people going, oh, thank God for the FDA doing the emergency use authorizations and getting, saving our lives, right? Like FDA really liked that. And whereas on our side of the fence, they're like, they can't really take credit for their good works, so to speak.
And to play devil's advocate, sometimes we make things hard ourselves. When the supplement industry does something dumb, it does make us look bad. So I can see why FDA sometimes gets upset at whatever some 20-year-old is doing out here and getting a lot of views. Yeah, right.
The last time we had action that was like actually trying to clean up the space was like when they started sending warning letters for DMHA in 2019. Like since then, we had that one where they were like yelling out Fit or Orange and they had to like identify the bioactives in it, which is like, you probably shouldn't call out hordenine in something if you can't sterilize it. But like, I 100% agree. There are a lot of black guys in our industry. There are people selling SARS. There are people going to prison. There are people doing all sorts of things. And I'm not a fan of regulation, to say it again. But like, there needs to be some guardrails. Like,
but I think there are. I mean, you bring up SARMs. I mean, back to the point, I think, and not to, but it just kind of hit me like someone in 1994, they know what a SARM was. But the law by statute doesn't fit in the category, right? Like it really doesn't fit in the category. Yeah. Like, I mean, I guess you could theoretically do a grass on a SARM and then put it in SARM water and sell, but I don't see that happen. I don't see it standing up to the grass scrutiny because it's a different.
It's a drug.
Yeah, it's a drug, right? I mean, we do have hormones in the diet, right? Like vitamin D is a hormone actually.
But there were drug
right.
for some of these SARMs, right? They modulate androgen receptor.
Right.
Like it's
well, they're not part of the diet, right? Like they're really, I mean, that's really where Deshay comes down to is these things were never, that's what's so funny about the NMN argument is NMN has been part of diet. Now we didn't identify it as part of the diet, but it's always been part of the diet.
It's been with us forever.
It's always been in part of the diet, right? So that's where you're like, hey, this statutorily, it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
I mean, how many years of adverse reactions like need to happen to these different things for them to start looking in that direction? Is I guess my question.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully it doesn't take that, right? Like that's really like that shouldn't be the agency's purpose is to be that reactive, right? They are, we're always told the agency's in a reactive posture. Yeah. Well, that's kind of, they volunteered for that. They're not being victims. Like they could be, look, it's not hard to find. And we've sent them stuff, we send them stuff very frequently on, hey, we've seen this out there. You may want to go do something. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's like, it shouldn't be us sending it to them. Mm-hmm. I mean, this should be, they should be actively. How much staff time would that take to actively have somebody, just type in SARMs once a week to a search engine and see what comes up?
This could be automated too.
Right. Web crawlers, AI. Right.
I also that thought media services, I could turn it out for that.
Like
there you go.
Send you a link to a TikTok.
Right. A store owner with an entire shelf, like 3 walls wide of just like LGD and Austin.
And we sent it to him.
Oh, well,
we sent it to him. Yeah.
But point being, like, You wouldn't list a drug dealer on a corner wouldn't list that on TikTok. I'm selling heroin in the corner in First Street, whatever.
No.
Right? Like,
No.
I
No, you're right. I mean, that's where the frustration is, though, is they, especially right now, they have it backwards, right? They taught us, they sent, there was this great guy at Harvard Kennedy School, government affairs school, a guy named Malcolm Sparrow. Neat guy, if you ever get to read it. And he was brilliant guy, got an Oxford PhD in math. And then the next day, he said it was my parents' happiest day of their life. And then the second day was the saddest because he told them he was going to Scotland Yard to become a cop. They're like, wait, you just got an Oxford PhD. But long story short, he kind of like, he boiled any regulator down to kind of a bell curve. And he goes, look, this is oversimplistic, but it's a bell curve, right? You have your good guys on one side of the curve, your bad guys on one side of the curve, speeding tickets, banks, whatever it is. Really, that bell curve is going to move more towards compliance. The only way they move is if the regulator hits the bad side, right? Then everyone starts to move over. FDA seems to be on this side, right? Like you're going after like NMN, like you're going after, like instead of going, hey, there's some problems over here. We're not saying how many, but like go, like move the curve.
Okay, so if I put you back in the FDA right now, I get a magic wand. I put you back in with control, quadruple your budget. Is that enough? Like, what do you do? Like, give me your top list of how we protect public health, which is the charter.
Yeah.
And maybe go after those bad guys
Sure.
that are not protecting public health.
I think you budget aside, I think you go after those things like you sent to me. I think you go after those. When somebody sees FDA spending a lot of time on something like NMN, okay, that's going to leave a gap somewhere else. And it has. It left a gap in SARMs and things like that to where they're out there, where you can find them. I look at the if you will, the gas station Viagra as an example, right? That's been out there for 10 years. You're telling me FDA doesn't know where to find those, right? Like, I mean, at some point.
Consumer Reports have said this, right?
Well, right. And there was a news story in one of the local health rags here where the guy went to the gas station literally across the street from FDA headquarters at White Oak and found them there. And it's like, you're right. It's like,
yeah, but the guy at the gas station selling it, he's the street level dealer. Like,
sure. But what they can do, they can't go to Amoco, BP, Exxon. There's a Gas Merchants Association. Once it comes full circle in DC, Association for everything, and FDA can't write them a letter and saying, "Hey, we've noticed that you're particularly heavy on these products. We'd love to know who the distributors are who are part of your organization."
You start working your way back up,
it's a regulator. The problem with regulators, I think, especially FDA, is because you have some really smart people with PhDs, MDs. They don't want to be cops. Guess what? For our commodity, they're cops. It's police work, right? At the end of the day, it's good old-fashioned police work.
Yeah, we've said for a while, I have to attribute this to your idea with they start the manufacturers. Right, like that's really where this happens, where the importation happens, where the adulteration happens, where the lying of the labels happens. Like those guys that make the decision that this is going in the bottle and it's not going on the label, or this is going in the bottle and we're just going to sell it like this, whatever it is. Yeah. That's where the decision happens. Most brand owners are ignorant to the fact that this is illegal, to be honest, most of the time, in my opinion. So it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think you talk about the manufacturers, and that's another thing is. FDA can go and say, hey, who are the manufacturers you guys are buying from, and run the list if they're even registered as food facilities or not, right? I bet they'd find some that aren't. I mean, and so all these things, all these creations like MPL was just, I mean, I don't know how that's workable because either you list everything or FDA is the gatekeeper, right? And if you list everything, well, then the gas station Viagra is going to be on the list too, right? And people are going to go, hey, it's on the list. I'm FDA, I'm FDA, whatever. I made the list. So, yeah, it really is old-fashioned police work. And like you said, see the manufacturers. Like, how do they, to your point, they make all these guesses of how many products are out there. What if they visited the top 100 contract manufacturers out there and they can take the labels there and then they know exactly how many products that covers? Wouldn't that be a helpful data point?
Mm-hmm. So you want to do good old fashioned police work and everything. Would recruiting talent be a difficult thing nowadays? Like, do you think enough dudes would want to side with the federal government on some of these things? I say dudes, like people who are like want to kind of go and do that.
I think it comes back to this. I had when I went to the agency, a lot of people were, beyond pissed at me, if I may be so bold. I left it. Right. I came from here, NPA. I was at the first. So,
and you came back.
Yeah, and then I came back. The old revolving door. Oh, they killed me in the press about that here in DC, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, you've seen it all. You've seen it all. You do your homework. We know that. So look, I think, and I'm not different by any means, but I was a dietary supplement user, right? And people ask me, do you use dietary supplements? Yeah. I mean, when I took the job, they're like, you do? And it's like, yeah, I do. I was a college athlete. Yeah, of course. It's like, I want to know, like, I want someone in that chair that goes, yeah, there's a value to the commodity, right? Because 80% of Americans think so. Why wouldn't somebody sit in that chair think so, right? So that's what's just, I think it starts from that place, right? It's like, hey, this is something that people want to stay healthy, well, they want, to perform better, recover faster, whatever it is. Like, that should be the mindset, right? Like, that's the public, it's a public trust, right? That's the public trust they're keeping. As you know, 80% of the country is going to take these products. Well, somebody out there ought to think about the commodity in that regard and go, yeah, these folks, just like someone who eats an egg, right? Like, they go, well, we don't want people to, we don't want a kid to eat an egg with salmonella, or baby, infant formula. We don't want someone to eat infant formula with Sakazaki bacteria in it. So same here. And I think it starts with that mentality. I certainly see your point that I think people more and more have lost faith in institutions, and I think it's for things like NMN, right? And NNAC.
I'm just thinking like, military recruiting's down, like certain things like that. So it almost seems like it'd be tough. But if you, one thing I've seen is if you drive like a vision and you kind of advertise, I don't know if the government could like advertise their vision, but if you say, hey, we got to do this and this, and it'll be better because of these reasons, it's good. You see, when we talk about here's our passions, our PricePlow, it's easier to hire people on who know like what we're all about and everything. So I was just kind of curious about that. I have to return. Why did you go and work for the federal government after being here? Like, did they ask you? Did you ask them? Did you apply for a job? Was it?
I applied.
It was on Indeed.com or something. Like, how did this work?
No, it wasn't on Indeed. I had a friend in, having been at the trade association and having been in DC for a fair amount of time there, I knew a lot of people at the agency, was constantly working with the agency. And, certainly my first trip here, we did our fair share of quibbling and fighting with the agency. But the guy who was the director then was leaving, and a friend of mine was like, you really ought to apply, because here we had, NPA had the first GMP program in the industry, and really that was a big part of it. Was like, I was pretty excited about the GMPs at the time, and it was an opportunity to kind of, part of it was, I think like you guys, sometimes I just want to see what can be done. Like, I just kind of want to, like, I was really curious. I was like, I think we can do like the GMP inspections and things and ramping them up. It was like, I think we can do that. And I think that was a good, like, I just saw it as whether I was going to do it here at NPA or do it with the federal government. I'm not going to say it was the exact same part of the job, because one, you have the force of law on your side, the other is just industry. But that kind of really led me to it. It was a great experience. It wouldn't change for the world. Don't get me wrong. I'm incredibly happy to be here at NPA and be back on this side of things. But yeah, that's what kind of led me there, Mike, is it was, and it was also it always bothered me, I think, looking back, the whole unregulated thing always bothered me, whether before I went to the agency, when I was at the agency, and now, at the agency, it used to drive me nuts, because you get a reporter from the APY or New York Times or whatever. New York Times skewered me. They wrote an op-ed about me on the front page, which the only other person I think they did it about was Trump, so you can't sue him if it's an op-ed. And it's just like, he led, he was a friend of industry and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, we sent more people to jail and shut down more businesses than anybody during any other time. And it was just like, okay, that argument, there are people out there that really like that argument. Sells papers, I guess.
Getting to know you has changed the way that I look at those kinds of stories, because I want a supplement user. I want an industry person. I want you at the end of the FDA. That makes sense.
Not going back.
I understand. But you kind of understand my point, though, is like, if someone offered it to me, I take it, because like you said, I want to do things. Like, I understand exactly how you mean from a different angle. I hated dietary supplements for the industry for all these reasons. I never wanted to work in the industry, but when Mark Glazier offered me a position, I thought I could do things there that would help change things.
Sure.
And just like you leaving the FDA, I came to PricePlow and realized from third party I could do even more.
Yeah.
Right. I want to do that work.
Yeah, I would want a creatine user in there who actually loves creatine and wants the cleanest creatine
Right.
possible and wants to know that every product is good. If we have someone in the FDA who hates creatine, then we're
Right.
just going to be fighting the same thing for another 30 years.
Yeah.
So it does make sense.
We get a lot of negative comments when I speak. Well, we get a lot of negative comments. Period. We get negative comments when I speak about regulations in a positive way, but they don't realize that these rules set in place, like that's the rule set that allows everyone to be safe to use these products and know that what's on the label is in the bottle. Right. And so, like, I mean, if it was all Wild West, we could take anything we wanted. That would be an interesting prospect as well. But within this framework, like, we could have these things, and that's why I want people that use the product. Before we started this podcast, we were talking about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
We talked about training. That's the people I want to be around. I don't want to do a podcast with some overweight guy that just, throws things out there about nutrition because he thinks it. Whatever.
Right.
Like, you live the lifestyle, and that's commendable to be that kind of person.
I mean, a little fluffy right now. I got to be honest. I got to cut a little weight, but no. But and I think that's important. I think it really is, just from a public health perspective, right? The agency's always first to go public health, public health, public health. 80% of the country is that's a lot of public health, right? And from multivitamins to whey to, it's like, yeah, why? That should be a given. It really should be, but I don't think that they're at that place right now. I think there's still some hard feelings about whether it was about Deshay, whether it's about, we were talking before about, I think so. I don't think all of it is the medical community, but I think a lot of it is they're always afraid of losing power, or they get 16 hours of nutritional education before they get their MD. It's not a lot. 16 is not a lot, right? There are stores where they get more than that.
I went to college for dietetics, and I didn't feel like qualified. That.
Right.
Like, I'd learned way more time working in the industry. Like,
Right.
That's where I learned all my stuff.
Well,
it wasn't there.
And also just things like seeing a facility, right? Like that was when I first came to NPA, then NFA, it was like when I'd get to go see the manufacturers and go see the facilities and really get to dive in, like, you talk about eating your learning curve, but that's where you really get to see, okay, what's going on that's good, what's going on, where are the holes, and that's really, the agency, that's the other thing. The most important thing the agency does is inspect and test, right? Like inspecting a facility, you get labels, you get everything you want to know when you go see a facility. And that, I think there's got to be more of a focus on that, because even that at a minimum, right? Why wouldn't you want someone in that chair who at least wants to go see as many facilities as you can, right? Like that should be table stakes, right? Like, don't they want to do that for people who are harvesting spinach? And, it's like, right?
So we've done a lot of like really general stuff.
Yeah.
Ironically, we keep stepping back, but I do want to step forward into one topic, which is NMN.
Yeah.
Now, if anyone sat through your entire thesis, I'm guessing, so
it's pretty
they might
great.
be tired of hearing this, but the people who sat through that probably are very interested in this. But not to take that episode for granted, I kind of want to get into the NMN talk about what happened, the timeline, and maybe like where we're at right now. And
Sure.
there's a deadline that we need to get to.
And
open that.
yeah, I agree. And I would like to quickly know, in terms of our agenda this week, how high is NMN compared to some of the other things?
It's one of the leave behinds.
Okay,
So we've got
let's get
about
into it.
7 or 8 leave behinds. Yeah, it's a big one. It's a very big one, because I think, we spent a lot of time together on NAC, and literally we dismissed the case on NAC, and 2 days later, here's the nonsense on NMN, and we're like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Like I don't know that we would have dismissed the case per se. I don't know that we could have transferred NMN over as a complaint. Like we probably would have to file a new complaint and everything else. But it's different. So do you want to start kind of where we are?
Or bridge,
Sure.
Up here, the David Sinclair, basically, kind of thing, maybe a little bit, just NMN as a whole.
Can we do an abridged NMN? I mean, there's so many. Like,
I'll give you like my one sentence.
Yeah.
They're trying to ban a B vitamin. Stuff like that.
I think that's as well said as you can say it. It's a B vitamin, right? And it's one that has been in the diet. Definitely some goofy stuff, whether it's the clinicaltrials.gov replacing NMN dietary supplement with MIB 626, which are they on? That sounds like a movie. But replacing that in clinicaltrials.gov. They ignored the GRAS. The self-GRAS clearly predates whatever they have up their sleeve on the IND to preclude it from the market, and they've just completely ignored that. So the question I get all the time, and I know we've gone about this, is, hey, so can I sell it as a food and not as a supplement? And it's like, that may be a reality. And you go, how is that FDA's job? Like, what a waste of time and resource and everything else, if that's really what this is about. I mean, I think I would add to what you said.
I can do a better pitch.
But I think they're trying to ban a B vitamin to protect pharma IP. That would be my only add.
There we go.
So,
yeah, because there was a drug application, investigational new drug application, IND, for NMN. We don't know the exact date on it, but it was, but it was already generally recognized as safe in 2018. We have that documented, and it was also, before they poo-pooed it, it was actually acknowledged as a new dietary ingredient. And the only way to unacknowledge, I'll just say, like, only way to stop a new dietary ingredient is to have adulteration concerns.
Adulteration or misbranded, which it's neither.
Which we don't have. Yeah, there's no safety because there's nothing. So
let's put it in order. This super vitamin is found to have an acknowledgement from the FDA that it is dietary supplement in what year?
The acknowledgement as a dietary supplement was 2021.
Okay.
In May of 2021.
The GRAS status was in...
The GRAS status was 2018.
With Nutrilite as well.
Yeah.
It's notified as generally regarded as safe.
And now with that's not a notification though. That was
self-GRAS companies do that under
self-affirmed.
scientific procedure. They hire experts and they say, hey, there's this ingredient NMN and there's tox work and everything else. And these experts get together and go, yeah.
Cool.
But
it was accepted. It was
Well, and
but
ironically,
at that point, it could enter the market as a food substance, or I'm not sure the exact word.
right.
so then it starts getting marketed as a dietary supplement widely.
It was marketed before that widely,
Right.
I mean, so like that was the point at which somebody should have said, hey, you don't have an NDA. Like FDA should have, back in, I think 2013 is some of the first records of maybe 2014. That was when FDA should have said, hey, there's no NDI for this.
Okay. So then at some point, we don't know when, there was a drug application made, and the FDA is not allowing us to know when that was.
That's correct.
Because that would really help out this timeline right now.
I wonder why they won't tell us.
Right, and they keep clinging to the part of law that says they don't have to tell us. It's like, no, you don't. Actually, I'm pretty sure the law reads you don't have to tell somebody who's competing as another IND.
Right.
But for this, I don't know that necessarily jives. But again, that's another legal argument potential down the road.
So then when is the final, hammer that comes down?
The hammer came down basically when, so they get the AKL, the acknowledgement letter, and then 6 months later they get the letter saying, oops.
New information has come to light. I'm pretty sure is the phrase.
Yeah, exactly the phrase. And then there's some calls and things like that at the end of the year last year. And then it just became like, it literally was, deja vu all over again. We were reliving NAC, right? It was like the agency's like, nope, we're not gonna listen. We're just gonna, full speed ahead. This can't be a dietary ingredient. And it was like, didn't matter what we gave them the GRAS, gave them all the Sinclair stuff is robust because he's on Joe Rogan in 2017, 2018, talking about NMN supplements that he gives to his dad that he uses. And it's like, and now we're going a complete 180.
And so David Sinclair is important because he co-founded the company that is actually behind the new drug application.
Yes.
When I was doing all this research though, and I love the biochemistry, I love this is actually really beneficial ingredient in my opinion. It all came down to the simple fact that there was an acknowledgement letter, and then FDA sent the new information has come to light letter, and there is no legal basis per what Congress has approved or what the FDA has in their own guidelines. There's no legal basis to undo it. There's no takebacks. And so that's where okay, all this biochemistry is interesting. David Sinclair's stuff is interesting. Them changing the study from the word supplement to the name of the drug, and that's all in document and everything. That's interesting too. But if you just want to look at it like a lawyer and a judge,
black letter law.
The law doesn't allow them to take it back. And I love this story. It's great, but it all came back to just this one thing. They can't take it back.
Right. A letter of the law, the horse is out of the barn, right? Now, they could make the argument, and it might be a good one, that It would only apply to that one company.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that could be because NDIs are specific to, it's not a general notice, right? It's specific. So now that would be interesting, right? It's like, well, so we want to set up a monopoly for one supplement company and one drug company.
They sponsor monopoly.
Right.
So let me ask you like a devil's advocate question here. Has this ever happened before?
No, nothing like this before. The only thing similar, I guess, relatable, and you covered it in yours, is vinpocetine, right? Vinpocetine, you know, and Senator Hatch, God rest his soul, he was all over them on that. I mean, he was great. We went to him on that, and he goes, "Ooh, they're trying to do what?" It's like they gave the AKL letter, not once, but five times. Yeah. And then FDA is like, well, we don't think we can do that anymore. And FDA's response after he completely pushed him back in the box was like, yeah, you're right. We really can't do it. And here they are. Now, this is much more of a, they're a lot more aggressive, you know, I guess partially because we don't have Senator Hatch anymore, though some members of Congress, and you'll see them tomorrow, have certainly pushed back. I was telling Mike, Jeff Duncan, his response, his staff called over to FDA, and we've heard that FDA said, well, we've got our attorneys looking at our response right now. So in some ways, that's a good sign.
Yeah. Right. That was our last update, is we actually got a letter from Congress, and now we're basically, the clock is ticking, we're waiting kind of.
Yeah, it's kind of like a countdown to a fight. Our citizens petition effectively becomes ripe after 180 days, which will be, I believe, September 6th. And so at that point, you know, that would be the first bite at the apple we would have for ripeness in the judge's eyes. If they, you know, whether they did, now they might deny it before then. They might say, FDA on citizens petitions generally sends you a letter at day 179 going, we have your petition, it's still under consideration.
So what can we do in the meantime? Like, okay, funny story. Ted Cruz was on my airplane to DC here and everything. Like, does it help to get more people involved? Does it? I'm sure it helps, but like, are we just, no matter what, we're still kind of waiting, right?
We're waiting, and you know, the NMN companies are going to have to, you know, they're going to have to step up in some ways on this, right? I mean, they're going to have to really start, and a lot of them are here this week, which is great, which is a good sign for that. They're going to have to, you know, it's funny for an industry where you have so much. The consumer community, I think, is so united. The industry is so, you know, so fragmented, right? And so this is another example of, it's like, there are some folks, they were from the ingredient side, and they're like, well, we don't really belong to trade associations. Well, you better. And then there were some brands that were, you know, similarly. And then, you know, you've got folks in the middle. You know, kind of selfishly, one of the realities is, you know, we have about 700 members. I've heard reports that there are over 10,000 brands for the industry. 700 is not even 10%, right? And you go, wait a second. That's a concern. Folks need to participate. So it's really at what level they're going to participate. You guys have been great. The cards and letters, they matter, right? Congress knows if someone's willing to send an email, that's someone who's probably going to go vote, right? So they get enough of those, they start going, okay, I got 250,000 people in the district. I got 20,000 emails on this. That's almost 10%.
Right.
I better start getting a plan on this, right? And that's important.
So from a street level, like just making noise and dropping more links, dropping like for us, like more videos or whatever could help. Okay. So let's say I'm Ted Cruz. I got a border crisis going on. I have all this stuff. I almost got beaten by Beto or whatever last time. Like, I have a lot going on. Why should I care about your dietary ingredient, dude? It's NMN, like it's a vitamin. You just go take niacin.
Right. And this is a big part of what we're about tomorrow is you guys represent jobs. You guys represent taxpayers. You know, not just whether the congressperson likes the industry or not. Here's the other thing. You think Ted Cruz has ever been to a dietary supplement facility? Now, we've tried to get him to one, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't. So this is the opportunity for him to go, hey, and it's an opportunity for everybody who's here to go come to our facility.
And there's a lot in Texas too.
Yeah, right. And so that's important, right? Like they need to know our industry. They need to know what we do. Chances are, and I'm pretty sure he takes a multivitamin every day, you know? So I think it's one of those where you're right. There's certainly not a lot of oxygen in the room right now with everything going on in the world. At the same time, that's exactly why we have to be here, right? Because if you don't show, nobody knows, right? Like they're just completely like, oh yeah, you guys are fine. Your business isn't going to change. Like I'm pretty sure also, if they're not on the committee of jurisdiction, they probably don't have a lot of idea of what FDA is up to, right? Like people on the committees, I think, are starting to get a little ticked off with FDA and some of the nonsense, whether it's the CBD. I mean, they've run that clock for 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. You know, they ran the clock on NAC to some degree. Now they're seeing the same thing on NMN, and it's just like, okay, our industry may not be their favorite, but like rules are rules, right? Like Congress, like you said, it's a power grab. If someone in Congress go, hey, we set out these rules for you, you're not going to follow them. You know,
I think one issue is, and then getting other brands involved. Like, I'm going to toss a brand out there that I know is successful, probably is not part of NPA. Alpha Lion, for instance.
Okay.
I don't think they care about Amazon, because Amazon will do whatever FDA asks, it seems like. But they did their direct to consumer. They make a lot of money. What are the benefits of them joining NPA when this industry makes a lot of money? We do pretty well, and it seems like the industry can do pretty well even without much representation in DC. Until it can't,
right. And that's the whole thing. I mean, that's the one thing I always tell people is, look, we're not going to compete with pharma on PAC dollars or contribution dollars. We're not. And we do have the grassroots, which they don't have. But then, you know, the game really, you know, it's like football. You have offense, special teams, and defense, right? You've got grassroots. You have your contributions, your ability to contribute, and not that those buy votes, but it buys time for sure. Like, you get face time. And then you have really the top roots, the interaction, like you had an interaction today with Ted Cruz. How many people get to say that every day, right? Like, that's important. He's seen you once, he sees you again, he's going to go, okay, this guy keeps showing up at my doorstep. I got to take note of this guy, right? Because he doesn't know how many voters you can get a hold of. He doesn't know, like, those are the sorts of things where they, you know, you've got to be involved, because otherwise it's like everybody, you know, it's funny. I think every industry you get folks who tell you they know this person, they know that person. I know this congressman, I know this congressman. It's, you know, the folks who actually come and put boots on the ground, it's a different story. The folks who get someone to their facility is an even smaller minority, right? Like, so that's where, for our industry to remain viable with, I think, the limits on, I think with people's personal politics, they're not going to, you know, we're not going to all of a sudden show up and have $1 million in our political action campaign to give to different candidates. They're really going to have to get involved. And that's the benefit is, if they don't get involved, look at New York State. Look at California. Look at MPL from last year. I mean, we got lucky as heck on MPL. They had the majority in the Senate, they had the majority in the House, and we were still able to defeat it. That was big. A lot of that was grassroots. A lot of that was just, you know, we were very strategic. We also worked across the aisle. We worked with people who would normally, you know, in such a partisan year, Senator Durbin is, you know, a very strong Democrat. A lot of people have to listen to him because he's in leadership. We were able to break a few people off that were critical, right? That's important. And you don't get those relationships by not showing up, right? Yeah. Yeah.
My concern is simply that our industry is so specifically worried about perception and clout. They want to do what looks cool. They want to drive Ferrari. They want to post pictures in Instagram, Miami. They don't want to go to DC. They don't want to do the ugly stuff. And, like, honestly, I think it takes something really bad out of me.
Yeah, and you're right. And I wish that wasn't the case. They call DC Hollywood for ugly people, so it's funny you brought that up.
The problem is that if NMN goes down.
Yeah.
I have a couple good friends up here because they actually know what nutrition is about.
Yeah.
It's not the NMN that's strong. It's the precedence it sets for other ingredients.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And nothing to up dollars out of a lot of pockets.
Right.
It's a NMN we can't lose. I will say this, and this isn't a Chicken Little sky is falling thing, but the meteors are coming down if you lose NMN, because you could basically now, and this is not to encourage any of your listeners to do this, but with some of the AI engines, okay, you can have AI write an IND. You can have AI look at every chemical that's ever been extracted from a botanical, or every combination of peptides from proteins, and why not just submit some bolus IND that covers everything that's been in the diet and go, hey, we're gonna do a drug study on this, and so it can't be a supplement ever.
Right.
I mean, you could really just lock everything out. Like, hey, let's be part of an industry that has absolutely no possibility to innovate in the future. Doesn't that sound like a good future to have?
Okay. I think Ben and I were thinking that the bigger concern is that they can remove an NDI that's already been acknowledged. But you're like going further. You're more into the investigational new drug action, how everything can just be like firewalled off.
Yeah, right. I mean, right.
I agree with all of it.
Yeah, I didn't think about all those things. Yeah.
My real concern is that, like, we lose NMN. It sets a bad precedent, and we start losing things that make us a lot of money. Sure. That secure key revenue that keeps brands afloat.
Yeah.
Right. We like, I don't know, something stereotypical, something that like, whatever. We start losing things that brands and consumers really love. And we're stuck here saying, I told you so. That doesn't save anything.
No, it doesn't. That's why we want to be out in front of it now. And that's why I think you're right. I think folks are real happy to just go, hey, look at my brand, look at how, but you've got to look at every industry across the board, right? You can't just, and people always get pissed at me when I say this. If our enemies compare us to tobacco and petroleum, well, then we better fight like them. Or because if you're going to be treated like them and not fight like them, what's going to happen? And obviously we have a total different corporate structure, total different mindset, total different goals, total different passion. But at the end of the day, those are the tactical behavior has to mirror that, and so a big part of their tactical behavior is being here in DC, because otherwise, if they weren't, they just get carved up.
Okay. So I was going to say, maybe your question is quicker. I was going to say, walk us through one of the meetings we're going to have tomorrow or something like that. We're going to meet with a staffer. We're going to meet with a senator, representative, or anything. Like, what's going to happen? Can you kind of prepare us?
Sure. You're going to meet with members, and then as well as, I think most of the meetings are either with chiefs or LDs, which are higher level staffers, right? Which are folks who've been around. They've got some seasoning. They've got some SWAT. They've got some pull. That's important because they're the ones who really drive kind of the policy of the members. So you walk in, do the pleasantries, tell folks kind of where you're from, and let it go from there. It's a small world, I think, is one of the key themes. You'd be surprised that you very well may know someone who knows them, and it's kind of it really is kind of a small world. Especially folks from from the home state, from Oklahoma or from New Jersey. And then just kind of walk them through the issues and walk them to the importing industry, and also walk them through what you guys do. What you guys do is so critical in terms of getting out information and also shining a light on what's good, but also what may not be good. And that, I think one of the key things that they get from us is they see that the folks that show up to this thing, they're rule followers. They're folks that, they're folks that go, look, we understand. We want there to be an FDA. I think what we effectively said is we want there to be a strong FDA. We want there to be an FDA that appreciates the commodity, that does their job. We don't want there to be an FDA that mucks around with things that really are kind of, you go, this is in the diet. Like, where's the fire, right? Like, there are real problems out there. We want them focused on real problems. And I think that's, the gist of the conversation, to the extent, staff wants to go deeper on issues, they will. And it's, and the best part is we've got, I think, about 75 chiefs chiefs of staff committed to coming to the event after. And that's really, that's where they really get to talk to you, right? Like, we'll have some of these there. They can mix with their favorite spirit, and not that we're advocating that. Not that we're advocating it.
But putting the C4 smart energy.
But you get my point. They get to, that's the other side of it is it's still, you're going to find some staff that work out. You're going to find some members. When we go see Mark Wayne, Mark Wayne was he's a professional fighter. So he certainly knows, he knows his way around the whey protein. And, that's, I think it's introducing that part of the industry too. Cause I think what they hear and what they see in the papers sometimes is you're not regulated. And so just being able to dispel, if nothing else, you walk out of them going, oh yeah, that's great. I didn't know that FDA did that. That's a major victory, right?
Cool. Okay.
Major victory.
Nice.
So,
Exciting.
yeah. No.
So now, so you have a lot of people coming and visiting and everything, and we're going to see them tonight and everything. Yep. Have you set up schedules for everyone? Is that you personally, or like, do you have a whole team of
Not me personally. Kyle, who heads up our government affairs, you guys have spoken with Kyle. He's been great. This is in a lot of ways his baby. Now if it goes well, he gets all the credit. If it goes poorly, then I get all the blame. No, but no, it's going to go very well. He's been setting up schedules. We generally do, and you guys we've got a few other meetings for you guys, but generally, at least the baseline is you meet with both senators' offices and the rep. So, but we've got some extra because, you guys are, I think you guys have a unique perspective on this.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
No.
And camera friendly, are we going to be able to get some B-roll in here, or like
staff's a little tough? I think walking the halls we can. I think in the meetings it's going to be a little tougher. I think pictures and things like that, definitely. The staff are always very camera, like they're like, and rightfully so. Like
Understood.
their
Oh,
whole
yeah.
job is protect, because God forbid, he's having a bad day and said something, and it's like
The age we live in.
right.
You cannot slip.
Yeah, can't
unless
slip.
you're Trump and you can just it bounces right off you. Like, yeah, this stuff will.
But definitely, pictures, definitely walk in the halls. If you see someone out of an office, certainly, hey, ask them if they take a supplement. I mean, it's one of kind of the easy icebreakers. We do a training in the morning, which is great. It's headed by one of our outside contractors, a guy named Frank McCarthy, Frank's actually most of his clients are labor, like AFL-CIO, and we're his kind of outlier client, but he likes working with us. He likes the issues. But he's, when he goes to offices, and he'll admit it, he's not as knowledgeable as anyone here on the issue. The first thing he says, he asks them what supplements they take, and he goes, that just kicks down the door, right? Like,
Easy.
Yeah. So it's a good way to get it started, and I think just hearing from us and seeing folks, for better or worse, they see me and Kyle all the time. Probably tired of looking at me.
Nice. So obviously this is the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of states issues happening as well.
Yep.
Ben was involved in New Jersey and everything.
Yeah.
They're going to quote unquote care about what's happening in their state, but they don't really have that much. Do they have power, or do they have like sway in?
Yes.
How does it work between the states and the federal guys?
Great question. Directly, sometimes, usually not directly.
Right.
Indirectly, over 50% of the members of Congress now once served in a state house.
Right.
So there's still a lot of, hey, what are you doing back home?
Mm-hmm.
We've had some opportunities where we've had folks write letters where it's like, you get the New York delegation and write a letter to the state of New York. That's a big deal. So that's something we're certainly looking at. But, the bad ideas, we've got to cover them on both ends, right? So like we're here, we have to kind of tell them about the virtues of the industry, but also at the state level. We'll be doing more of the state stuff too. I don't think we have any major issues in Oklahoma, but certainly up and down the East Coast, we may be knocking on your door, because I think, in really sports nutrition, performance is front and center. For the states. But tell them about that. I think tell them, hey, look, this is, especially, you're going to run into folks who, the younger staffers tend to have just graduated college. The older staffers, maybe south of 30, still fairly active, probably, are users, right?
They probably know C4.
Right,
They
probably,
might know
right.
Ghost or
Right.
something.
So I think they'd be shocked somewhat to hear what's going on at state level.
Yeah, something that I like when I went to that Trenton day, like
I walked into there kind of, I don't know. I'm 30. I grew up through a couple of interesting eras of presidents and politics, and I really feel like I can make much of a difference. And watching Kyle just like nonchalantly talk to people that he used to talk with,
Yeah.
and then you start to realize about who you know.
In a lot of ways.
And then we sat in front of that council,
Yeah, the dais. Yeah, the committee. Yeah.
the committee, and watch Kyle's One Connection ask questions
Yeah.
of the people who are past this thing, banning supplements to underage kids, asking like, my child is at college and they want to buy vitamin C because they're going down with the flu. Can they go into a store? And the answer was, no, you have to ship it.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So like, to which we literally laughed audibly in the room, because it was preposterous that you started to realize how little these people do.
Right.
Like it was clear they had considered like, oh, you know what? Maybe a 17-year-old kid might be more positive for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we've lived a couple of last years realizing this.
Right.
Oh, this might be a mistake.
Right.
That it almost like made the whole thing okay to me, because it showed me that I have the opportunity to go into this house and say, hey, have you considered this thing? Because you're probably talking on 75 other issues today. Maybe they didn't consider this issue.
Right.
And so we as an industry get to step in and say, hey, this is our specialty. Did you consider these other things? And maybe be able to achieve that process.
Well, and even more than that, like with the example you brought up. Okay, so Kyle used to work in the New Jersey State Senate, and he kind of knew what was going on and was able to work with that member he worked with and craft questions. You better believe that the other side, the striped people who want to see our industry just go away, they were working with the people they knew to craft questions against us, right? So that's the side no one sees, is like, if we're not here, you better believe the people who are against us are here and going, hey, go get those guys. Yeah. And it's like, that's the thing. And so it's a tough way to think, but it's the reality.
Mm-hmm. They were using talking points like, say, eating disorders and fat burners were linked.
Yeah.
To which you guys literally had a FOIA report showed there had never been an adverse reaction in the history of the FDA in connecting eating disorders and fat loaders.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about like muscle builders.
Yeah.
We're sitting next to
that
these
creatine
women.
again.
Yeah,
It's that creatine again.
I felt so awkward sitting down as like this. At the time, I was like 260.
Sitting down next to these people like, creatine is completely safe. Like, it is preposterous. If you ask anyone in our industry if creatine's safe, like, we all know it is. We're like, I have to be the one to march in there with a beard, bald, and tell everyone that
right. We take,
steroids.
and that's the other thing is we take it for granted. But the fact that, you know, and we go, wait a second, nobody looked up the 300 plus safety studies on creatine, and like, you know, it's, and you're kind of like you're left with your jaw open, but that's kind of the reality, right? Is somebody from Harvard Stripe came down and talked to some 22-year-old staffer and said, hey, you know, that creatine boy, you know, it's like you expect the Morgan Freeman movie voice. The third largest killer of children in this country is creatine, right? Like, you know, like, right? So someone came in with that.
Could it be as simple as the nerds hate the jocks? And I straddle both, obviously more nerd than jock. But
Yeah, yes and no, but right, like we're so technocratic now, like, but there's so many people that still don't do the research, right? Because if you do your research, especially on something like creatine, you go, like, right. It's just you kind of shake your head, and they're like, well, you guys just see it that way. And it's like, well, no, it's what the numbers are. But you got to be there to tell them, right? Like, that's the other thing. If you don't show up, they win.
Do you keep the same conversation with shit? Comes on Saturday is over NPL.
Sure.
So NPL happened, and all of a sudden, you know, we published this podcast that split the industry. Everyone's on different sides of the teams.
Well, it wasn't that big a split. I think most of the sides were, get it out of here.
I thought people anyone who listened to understood.
Yeah.
But there were some people who were just so like steadfast, like, you know, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna help us. It's gonna weed out bad doers. So many different things. We now talk about NPL. However busy it's on.
Yeah.
But like, is there a status reporting that?
we've never even defined MBL.
Yeah, mandatory product listing. It was going to give FDA a public-facing database, and I don't know why it had to be public. That was, you know, you had to register your product, and, you know, they said it wasn't pre-market approval, but then they didn't say, well, they weren't going to decide what gets on the list and doesn't. So it's like, well, how's that not pre-market approval if platforms are going to set their shelves based on it? Because, right, no one's going to go, the insurance company's going to go, okay, make sure you use FDA's guidance on this to set your shelves. And if you're not on the list, you're not on shelves. Sounds like pre-market approval to me, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of gone away. It's still lurking in the background. There's still the proponents of it. They're really ego tied to it because I think like what we all said and all went through is like, it can't work. Like you either have FDA as the gatekeeper or you have everything on there. What's the benefit of either, right? Like it's worse if FDA is the gatekeeper because then the NMN argument, NAC, CBD, bye-bye, right? Like just gone without even FDA having to go, they're unsafe. You know, they just go, we don't want to list it.
My biggest concern was the ambiguity of the whole thing. Like,
right.
If we can have a very clearly defined set of rules, might be known as to say it, but if we can have a clearly set of defined rules with this like approval process and there was enough workforce where it would work, I might listen to it because it would clear out the big smoky dot is all the people that already ignore all of the laws.
It could possibly, potentially. I think the bigger, but see, I think that should be behind the scenes because for me, what's the point of being public facing? All that's going to do is in the States, some plaintiff's attorney is going to take the list. They're going to go in a vitamin shop. And if there's a product on the shelf in a vitamin shop that isn't on the list for whatever reason, right? Like maybe it's a different size and FDA forgot to upload it, right? Maybe it's a 24 count and not a 48 count, different flavor like we talked about. And they're going to go, oh, not on the list. Based on our consumer protection stat, you know, that's fraud and we're suing you. And you go, like, how is that benefiting anybody, right?
Guess, like, my point is that, like, because it's what you said, what you have always been saying, is like there already are regulations in place. Like, if we could just enforce those, it would work very similarly to this because you have clearly defined things to get.
I would change a word in that. They can enforce those. They won't, right? Like that's the issue, right? It's a willpower issue, right? It's not about, like, the tools are there, right? They really are. The tools are there. A lot can be done. They just have to do it. Right. And there are targets. And just what would happen? All right, let's imagine an alternative universe where what would happen if FDA just hit those targets, the SARMs, the people, you know, selling, you know,
Viagra.
Yeah, Phenibut, right? Like, you know, what would happen? Then, oh wow, then the industry's regulated, right? Oh, well, okay, yep, no more news story. I mean, and not to get too black helicopter tinfoil hat, but
I know where you're going with this. Okay.
yeah, but right?
So the perception that supplements are unregulated is a perception that is potentially beneficial for some people to
Yeah.
perpetuate.
I think it is. I really do.
Interesting.
I really
Yeah.
do.
My concern about this, the industry splitting, was that we had a decent amount of good doers on our side about this, but a decent amount of large brand and following and engagement that could have really participated in the grassroots, just not even open their minds that are coming to watching these.
Right. Which is, well, and this time it was MPL, which, I'm not going to say it was an easy fight because it wasn't. I mean, we fought like hell and we did some good things. And so did a lot of other groups. They deserve credit too. But, someone's going to get smart at some point and do it this NMN thing is like, I really see this as an existential crisis. And the issue on 201 is going to be that the drug exclusion criteria is really, why are people screwing with NPL when the drug exclusion criteria, that's our future, right? Like unless that gets resolved on some level and there's some sort of rational thinking, we're really going to have an industry with no new products. Like we're just going to be multivitamins, whey protein, like, okay, minerals. Like that's,
So status report on that is you're basically waiting to see some of this.
yeah, and FDA has been very cautious. I will say this. FDA, they tripped some wires on NAC that they haven't tripped here, right? Like they submitted some documents into court, Department of Justice signed documents that they believe it was a drug and didn't fit in the supplement category that we were able to, punch through and get standing quicker. Certificates of free sale, they were denying left and right. I'm guessing there's a stack of NMN certificates of free sale that are like, do not touch until September 6th over there, because we haven't seen any denials. We haven't seen anything like that could give us standing that they're going above and beyond. So they don't want it to be a final agency action. So those would probably constitute a final agency action. So they're being careful. I don't think they saw the lawsuit coming on NAC. Now I think they put their hand on the stove and they don't want to get burned again.
Wow. Okay. So this is going to take some more time though. Things happen slowly is what we realized.
Well, relatively speaking, yeah, but okay, if we tried to fix NAC legislatively, I mean, forget it, right? I mean, look at what CBD, all these guys are out there on CBD. We're going to fix it legislatively. Oh, the next farm bill. Oh, just like the last farm bill.
I was going to get into CBD next because you mentioned FDA having the tools. FDA has stated that they don't have the tools. Do we want to move into CBD at this point?
Let's go for it.
Is this a top priority this week?
Yeah. It's another one of our leave behinds because once they said, they did their whole press release. I think it was like the 25th of January, something like that. Yeah. That they're like, tools don't work. Wait, have you even used them? No, but they don't work. And it's like, okay. So now they're fleshing this out a little bit more. I don't know if you guys were on their seance last week or 2 weeks ago where they said why it won't work. And they said, well, they can't, under current authorities, they can't establish product standards. It's like, well, wait a second, we have GMPs. They can't establish dosage levels. Well, wait a second, you do that through the NDI. Part of the NDI requirement is, requirement 3 on the NDI is name of the product and amount per serving. Okay. And basis for what it's, how it's safe. Okay. Labeling. It's like, we got more labeling laws than every country around the planet. So I don't say it can't be labeled, right? Like food labeling is like, it's like 3 chapters of the CFR. It's big. Okay. Can't control contaminants. We have GMPs for that again. And then they go this whole, well, we need a whole new product center. And then you're like, of course, the old government empire build, right? And you go, well, wait a second. You've said you can't do this on a product by product basis for regulatory categories, right? You can't do it under the NDI process. You can't do it in the GRAS process. So you're going to combine everything, inhalable products, pet products, topical products with food products, and that's going to make the process easier? You go, yeah, this sounds like,
Yeah, devil's advocate here just for 1 second. We've already talked about what makes Dr. itself. CBD, like by definition, has, yeah, sure. Yeah. Like, so what's the standpoint on that? Because
the standpoint is the secretary, you have about 2,000 products out there in the market already, right? Just thinking in terms of public health, what would be more beneficial to those people? And I think Forbes did a study 2020 that 60% of the country has tried an ingestible CBD product. So what would be more beneficial public health wise? That you set up a daily level for those products and you come up with some sort of enforcement discretion, which you can do. You can write a reg relaxing the drug exclusion. Those products are already on the market. The horse has already left the barn. So if you really want to help people out and control risk, why not set a level? Why not inspect facilities and test products so they aren't, loaded with THC? Or do we just keep doing nothing and hope it goes away? Like, it's pretty, it's pretty straightforward where the solution is. The company has IP rights and everything else. I think where the difference is in this maybe versus some other issues in drug exclusion is, well, the dosage is completely different. I mean, the dosage of Epidiolex is 10 milligrams per kilo, which works out to about, in kids, it's about, 350 milligrams. In adults, it's almost a gram,
Wow,
right?
okay.
So that's what you see. Most of the products you see, are 50 milligrams, 100 milligrams, things like that.
Even right there's parallels in terms of pharmaceutical
Right. Niacin, right? Niacin. L-Dopa, another one, right? Like supplements you see 100 milligrams. I think the drug doses start at 250 milligrams. Other.
Just to be clear, you're arguing this from an ethical standpoint.
Well, public health too, though. Yeah.
Is there a clause in there that says an IND can be hard to eat those?
Sure. Yeah.
But like, is there a clause or any sort of rule that says like, yes, dietary supplement, here's the exclusion for a drug, but if there's public safety concerns or if it's already out there, ad nauseum in the industry out there, this is just basically an ethical.
It's common. I think it's common sense. I mean, I think it's like, look, they've got that. One thing we've learned through this whole CBD endeavor is there's one part of the law FDA is never going to use. They are never going to write a reg saying, "Hey, it was a drug first, now it can be a supplement." They have made that clear, right? Like they are. Yes and no. I mean, I think the angle is getting Congress to use it, forcing them to use it, or suing them. I mean, I think the quicker relief is suing them. I honestly do. I think on CBD, look, you've had people we submitted citizens petitions, so technically we have, and we got final agencies like, nope, not going to do it. Okay. Somebody, if I was in the hemp industry and ran a hemp company, I'd be like, let's do this. There's no reason not to.
Well, they're already making money, though. Do you think maybe they can make more? Or
I think they're hurting. I think most of the CBD brands are really hurting right now.
Now there's been a few articles that have found that the CBD industry is down decent.
And if you look
because
at the ones
of regulatory,
because they don't have a stable market. You look at the ones who didn't take money. Now here's where let's get our tinfoil hats on again. There's a lot that took a stake from tobacco.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Right.
Sure.
So let's think about this. FDA says we want a new center with rules like tobacco.
I see.
Pretty great if you're
Okay.
pretty great
I see.
if you're already playing by the rules of tobacco and you're a tobacco company with CBD and you go, let's roll.
I also do think the CBD craze has leveled. I'm not
I think
saying
that's fair.
CBD is not good. I think it's great for many people in the right cases, but I also think we saw like an unstated peak.
Right.
I mean, everyone was using it forever.
Sure.
2020, how long we still CBD? We were confused about the difference between isolate and full spectrum and what was actually being manufactured. And like 2020 was crazy. I think we've just kind of looked out, and then obviously the supply chain issues.
Well, supply chain, but I mean, look at basic macroeconomics. 2018, 2019, peak of the market, CBD was $4,000 a kilo. Now it's probably less than 100. I mean, the price per kilo of CBD got so bad that people on the farm said, we need to cook this, put an acid in, and turn it to Delta 8. Like literally, FDA created the Delta 8 market, right? By not regulating CBD, right?
And if people want to learn more about that, go to our CBD MD podcast at Civil Swift. We went in on that one. That awesome thing to bring.
Yeah.
So Dan, if I get my magic wand back out, you're back at FDA. What do you do about CBD to make more, first off, public health, but also make enough interested parties happy?
I mean, I think the only way to do it is use the pathways, right? Is set a top dose, set a level top dosage wise.
For dietary supplements.
For dietary and for foods too. Because I think FDA's got this other argument too, I forgot to mention, where they're going, well, we're concerned that foods with CBD, like there's the beverages, I think like Recess, that people just treat it like a regular beverage and will overeat or overuse it. And it's like, oh, well, now do high fructose corn syrup, right? Like that's not their role, right? People want to do the Tide Pod challenge. I've yet to see FDA write a reg cinnamon challenge, Tide Pod challenge. People abuse products. That's technically not FDA's jurisdiction, right? If there's instruction.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If you pull parallels from FDA's caffeine, which are trying to grow. They are not supposed to be taking like willpower into consideration. Like they're regulating certain things.
Right. And she used to get mad at me on that because I was on the other side. I was on this side, and she would say, well, all the products need to be taken away. I'd be like, not the ones with clear instructions and clear ways to differentiate serving size, right? So, because that's a letter of the law. If some kid, unfortunately, says, hey, a 14th of a teaspoon of caffeine is great, let me do 100 of those. They shouldn't be doing that. But if the instructions are clear and someone's going to go above and beyond that.
That's a tough one
Yeah.
because I don't know. I don't want a lot of regulations either, but I could have a tub of creatine sitting right next to a tub of caffeine. The powders look exactly the same from an untrained eye or whatever. I mean, I'm dead.
I get that. But at the same time, it's like, look, there's got to be, at what point does the government become the nanny state, right? At what point? And it's like, if you buy the product, And also, look, I'm not buying pure powdered caffeine, right? That's not how I get it. If someone's doing that, then they need to take the precautions.
Right.
But with that said, like that's their other argument on CBD is that, well, people are just they're going to eat the whole bag of CBD cookies and then they're going to have a problem. And it's like, okay, like let's get back to like reality here. And I think we've seen that with caffeine, right? Like even with caffeine, once it's in a product, if they were selling a pure CBD, okay, fine. But it's like, you're going to drink 10 of those in one sitting? Probably not, So yeah, magic wand, set a level, start inspecting, start looking at who's out there and what they're doing, right? Like that's the goal is if you say, hey, we went to this manufacturing facility and people really like that product. Yeah, because it's literally 50% THC. Yeah, of course they like that product, right? Yeah. Right. So their biggest adverse event is pizza ordering,
So at some point, like naturally derived CBD, maybe from a full spectrum or not, like if you have so much CBD, 100 milligrams, whatever it is, that's a dietary supplement, but you would still allow for a drug as a CBD isolate at higher doses.
Yeah. You don't mess with the pharma IP, but I think just in terms of public health and safety with all the products that are out there, FDA is never going to be able to, knowing what we know about FDA, they're going to go send 2,000 warning letters tomorrow, and then they're going to follow up with each facility and go do seizures, injunctions, things like that. Right. So where do you actually benefit the public, right? People want the product. People want to use it. So let's give them a platform, a safe platform to use it. And like you said, the drugs, we're not talking about, I have yet to see a CBD product, and maybe they're out there, but at least in the stores I've been to, I've never seen anyone claim for child seizure disorder. I've never seen any claims like that. The claims are all sleep, recovery related, things like that. To the extent it's a different indication, it's a different indication too. So, and it was a breakthrough medically for the kids who had seizure disorder to be able to use CBD, right? They had to use really bad drugs before, Dilant and things that were really harsh. So that's great. We're not trying to take that away, but why should somebody who it benefits for their sleep have to go, oh, I can't use it because the pharma IP forever and ever and ever? And why should I not have products that are made with GMP?
Is this a big thing in like Kentucky or I don't even know where all that is grown?
Yeah, Kentucky, North Carolina, Oregon. There were programs where the state said, hey, rip up your tobacco fields and plant hemp and there'll be a market for it. And they're going, 5 years out, they're going, what the hell did I do that for?
Yeah.
I think honestly, I don't know if there's really anywhere else with the conversations you have anything specifically, but like I think we get into this week. I think we're ready to follow up on this too.
Right. Yeah. And I think, if you're listening to this, follow us find our videos and stuff, the show notes, because we're going to have to post in like whatever video clips we can get in, pictures and everything. We'll do a lot of pictures and everything. This is going to be,
you guys are going to have fun.
Overall, like I have to look at it from PricePlow runs, we are a tech business that turned into we are a media business.
Right.
And so looking at it from a point of view of, we have 3 guys out here. I funded this trip and everything, or we funded this trip. We are not doing other work that brings us in revenue.
Right.
So why should PricePlow be here?
Well, just like you said, it's not directly, is it bringing you revenue? No. But if NMN disappears, and everyone who's selling NMN disappears, smaller pool, right? And I think those are the realities, right? Is people always go, hey, why go to Washington? This is politics. Nothing gets done. And sure, I can appreciate all that sentiment. At the same time, What does happen here in handfuls are adverse consequences, right? Is unintended consequences, especially. And the only way you get in front of it, unintended consequences, is by showing up, right? It's like you've got to, you walk. It's literally the equivalent. This may be oversimplifying it, but you put the kettle on the stove and you sit there and watch it. It never boils over. But the second you walk away, that damn thing boils over.
Of course, that's true.
And that's really a big part of it. And we're seeing. We've got FDA, who I would say is a conscious opponent at this point, right? We have an FDA that's a conscious opponent to the industry, and not having Congress is one control we have over them. Another one is the courts. And unless people are just going to start filing lawsuits, which those get expensive fast, so I'm not betting on that. This is the way we can keep some tabs on FDA. And there's even talks about, I mean, you've seen some of the rhetoric about getting the F out of FDA, right? Like moving FDA out of FDA, because people are like, all they care about are drugs. So can't we get a fresh start? Interesting concept. I don't know the likelihood of it happening, but it's certainly something where you'll hear people talking about that tomorrow. And so it's good to be part of that conversation, right? Because they may go, okay, Mike, Ben, you guys, what do you think? Yeah. Like, would that be good for you guys? It's like, yeah, it could be, So, and the relationships are important, right? Because here's the thing is you guys aren't going away tomorrow in this business. Some of these same folks who have stepped up for the industry and some of the same folks who have stepped against the industry, it's better that they know who the heck we are than not, right? It's a lot tougher to go. If you know someone, it's a lot tougher to try to gore their ox, so to speak. I think if you see what they're about, it's not perfect. It's not a dollar for dollar trade, but it's got to be done because, like I said, sure, you can go to a trade show, you can go to another event where you will find the newest, latest, greatest product, increase your bottom line by 40, 50%. Great. The government, if they want to, they can pretty much end our business in a day. And that sounds like, oh, that's oversimplifying it.
Yeah.
NPL would have cost us out of the gate $25 million. That's $25 million that wouldn't go to sponsorships, that wouldn't go to events, that wouldn't go to, wouldn't go to product development. Okay, so that's another regulatory cost, $25 million every year. You go, stifles innovation, stifles outreach, stifles all the things that do make us money. And so that's why we got to be here.
Yeah, when you ask that question, like, why come here? For me, I get very often when we stand up for things, I think, like, they've got us who.
Oh, amen.
Because
well said.
this is not sexy to talk about. You know what I mean? Like,
say we think it is, though.
I love talking about this stuff, dude. I'm actually on this, but like very, very straight up, like.
Nick Sell is not going to post this on his Rise TikTok.
No, and that's fair, and I get that some people don't like it because here's the other thing: is in some ways I think some people think it takes attention away from them, which is like that's the wrong way to think about it. This is here's the other reason: is this is one of the coolest things in the industry you can do because everything else we do in the industry is very. I don't want to say it's very cellular, but it is. You're going to be up on the hill tomorrow with other folks in this industry who believe in it enough to come here and say, "Hey, you know what? We deserve." The same attention, the same fair shake by government as every other industry. Mm-hmm. And working together with folks in that vein, you're building something. You're not just like, hey, let's just go and talk. And everyone's got their cliques. Everyone's got their own things they like. And that's fine. It's human nature, right? Mm-hmm. But this is actually, people talk about the greater good way too much. This is actually, you're working together for the greater good, right?
Like very, very seriously, every other day of year, people are bidding for clicks online or making videos about Joe's product stuff. You're always fighting, but they have all that infighting. But the fact of the matter is that we are fighting larger industries that are, whether it's just oxygen of the road,
right,
or very seriously like ink pharmaceutical like products that we possibly have. And that fight is much greater than that.
Yeah. So, amen.
I think maybe over the next years, this becomes more serious. We may see those people stepping up. But until then, the people that are not worried about all that competition, like I'm not fortunately, I'm happy to do this, but it's us. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think that if we stand up, I think a lot of people are going to follow that charge.
You guys have a huge following, and you guys, in some ways, what you do is you guys put people to a vote, not to make it too political, but you do. And it's like, hey, where are you going to show? Great, you can show up at this party, you can show up at this event, you're one of the cool kids. But if you don't, ultimately, if it's not your core belief to fight for the industry, It's not that cool.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, it's got to come back to that. And it is bigger. Yeah, we can all go back on Thursday to fighting with each other and saying our product's better, our facility's better, everything else. But like, hey, there are some real threats. I mean, you look at the states, we've got, we got California at it again. New York just passed. We've got to pray for a veto again. This isn't going away. And especially on the state issue, which is going to bubble up. Like I said, if 50% of these guys start at the states, these folks are going to be up here pretty soon, right?
Gotcha.
And so they go, hey, we just put a major hit on, performance in the states. Let's go try it. Let's go try it in DC.
Yep.
And I seriously feel that if a couple of these start leaking through, they'll feel way more confident.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Oh, yeah.
Just happening to be at some of these things starts to press brakes on some of these things. And we start being loud about it.
I mean, when we started going to that New Jersey thing, it was like, that's actually scary. Right?
People got
That's
into-
actually
yeah,
a problem, and so I think just be that example, like sorry to be that hard because
Right. And you remember the stuff with the gyms in New Jersey during COVID, where it's like, it's the same, right? It's like, hey, gym owners are the same way, right? One gym owner hates oh, that gym sucks, right? Like, but hey, at that point, it's like, they're after us, right? And that's the thing. It's what's the quote about? It's not paranoia if they're really out to get you. I mean, there are people that are out to get us, and not realizing that. I'm not saying every brand has to live out there in a state of paranoia. That's what their trade association is for. But one day, yeah. I mean, we're look. DC produces nothing: paper and lawsuits and fights, right? Like that's what happens here. It is Hollywood for ugly people. I mean, honestly, it's just like there's drama over things. You go, people are arguing over what, right? But that's that's government, right? For better or worse, and most of the time it's worse. But you've got to have. You can't, the whole reason for associations and for getting involved politically is you got to have a voice here constantly. You guys have more important work to do every day, and the brands do and everyone else does. And we're here kind of, slugging it out for, the little stuff matters. It adds up. And if we don't have that, it's hard to start from zero in this town. It's real hard to start from zero.
Well, we'll have everything linked up below. This video will probably be published after watching the content from this trip is set up because we'll live during the event. But I'm sure we'll have a follow-up. We'll have more time with the NPA.
Oh, yeah.
I want to come back and talk about NAC with Kevin at some point.
Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Definitely do that because I think NSC is like
We don't need to have like one episode per week or whatever, dude. Let's blast them in. I mean, when we have, you talk about showing up and thinking in my head, like we're leveling up by showing up and everything. But part of leveling up is getting on the experts onto this podcast. And we have the guy who actually sued the federal government over this ingredient that I find incredibly important. NAC,
Yeah.
We've got to talk about that. So that is definitely a follow-up episode with him.
Yeah.
So Dad, thank you so much. I know that you have a lot of people in town and everything, and you have taken a lot of time to talk to us specifically. So we're going to head over to the hotel at some point. But
yeah, well, quickly, just like quickly, please just define NPA. NPA National on Instagram.
NPAnational.org. Yep.
Is there an easy link to put into the internet browser to get to this kind of stuff, like the grassroots or anything?
If you just go to NPA National, there's a button that says Take Action, and you just hit the Take Action button, and then takes 30 seconds, right? 30 seconds. It's a form letter. If you want to make changes to it, you can. We're not dictators here. Benevolent anyway. But yeah, you can change it, and you tell them, you can even tell them, hey, I own this business, and this is my brand, and this is my story, and it helps. Our systems get through firewalls, everything like that. We aren't a consumer group, and we partner with the consumer groups often, like Alliance for Natural Health. They're great, but we've got a great following, and folks are. It's funny when, especially with NPL, and there's a threat of things being taken away. Folks are really motivated. I think on NMN we're seeing the same thing. Is folks are like, hey, enough is enough. One of the things we'll work on tomorrow is trying to get HSA, FSA coverage for supplements, which is great, right? People don't get excited for that though, and they should.
Right.
But as they do for, hey, you're taking something away, But we want to play some offense too, not defense all the time. So
They can find you there. I think that's pretty much everything we need to close this out.
yeah, and we'll on the show notes we'll post your LinkedIn because you're pretty active there too.
yes, thanks guys. I really can't thank you guys enough.
Thank you so much.
Mike, thanks.
Thank you
Ben,
so much.
thank you. Yeah.